Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes, maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, I'm delighted to welcome my first repeat guest to the show, and it is the author of this book, amazing book, The Transparent Sales Leader, and that is none other than Todd Caponi. Before I go on, if you haven't got Todd's first book, The Transparent Sale, highly recommend that anybody in sales read it. It shouldn't be a new way of selling, but unfortunately it is for most. I know it's a pattern interrupt because a lot of people are skirting around things, brushing things under the rug, which are going to come to the surface anyway. So why not control the message? But he takes us to a different level. And this is through the lens of leadership. And Todd developed his 5F framework during his time as a CRO in corporate. And without giving it away too much, the 5 F's are focus, field, fundamentals, forecast, and fun. Of course, we need fun after the last 2.5 years. And we talk about, how we can do this in many roles, whether we're interviewing, we're being interviewed, sales rep, obviously as a leader. But, the benefit of framework is that it's predictable, it's repeatable, it removes emotion. And in this particular one, it really is all encompassing. So it allows you to ensure that, if you're having your one-on-ones, all the deliverables, all the topics of discussion really have a house in all of these 5 F's. So it becomes easy to have these conversations. You can automate them knowing that, everything is being addressed. We talked about the importance of culture, especially in leadership, and, how this framework can help us create and define a culture, help us as leaders lean into our vulnerability and really disarm to connect with our team, to, model the behavior and really get the results we're looking for, but through dealing with people. We're not pushing product. We have to remember we're dealing with people, and the more we can be transparent, share within ourselves, that's what you're going to get in return from your team. So great discussion as always. Todd is full of nerd-ery, as he likes to say, but the nerd-ery really helps us understand the psychology, the neuroscience behind it, so we understand when we are doing this, the impact and the effect it's having on our audience and ultimately their brain. The brain is always like to predict, and how can we help to predict? Well, a lot of that is just being transparent, showing them up front what can they expect. I loved the conversation. Highly encourage you to listen to it. If you know anybody who you feel would benefit, whether they're new to sales leadership or tenured sales leaders, we can always be learning. Highly recommend you share it with them. If you haven't downloaded the podcast, encourage you to do that. And again, we'd always trying to get better. So love to hear a review. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And thanks for listening. So I'm delighted to bring back my first reoccurring guest, my second time round. And for the very good reasons of these two babies right here, Mr. Todd Caponi. And we're going to talk about today, the Transparency Sales Leader. So welcome back, Todd.
Yeah, I feel like David Letterman's Regis Philbin, right? Like Regis was on so many times that I'll try to match his record.
Well, that's obviously a good sign that you're on. I think the first book really did as a salesperson. It really opened my eyes to, just leading with transparency. And obviously you shared the science behind it, what it does. But, in corporate in the 90s, it was something that really wasn't done. So I love that you then took that and applied it to the next generation as a sales leader. So I want to start by just understanding kind of what compelled you to take what you did to the transparency sale to the sales leader. And, was it just kind of to debunk the fear, leading with fear, or did you see, perhaps a lack of quality sales leaders maybe accelerate through the pandemic, or what kind of compelled you to go into the leadership field?
Well, there was two things. So the first one that really did it was this idea that, when I first got promoted into sales leadership, it was like 2008. And I was always, a methodology and a philosophy nerd for sales, but I always had a sales process and a structure. And then all of a sudden I get like, Todd, you're in charge. Woohoo, right? Like the most exciting day ever. And then like 2 days later, I realized, wait, where did my structure go? Where did my process go? I was like, a dog chasing the car down the street every day, never knowing what direction the car was going to go. And I was just way too much of a nerd for that. So back then, I created a structure or a framework that I could just live by and see the holes before they form and always have that to fall back on. So that was the really the number one reason, is to just have a structure and a framework. But what I think makes it different is I've enhanced every single element of it through behavioral science. And along the way, two things. Number one, I've recognized there were things I did wrong, but there's things I still see just being done wrong that just traditionally have just always been around forever. And like maybe we need to rethink that. So that's number one. And then number two is, we, during this printing process, there's supply chain issues, there's print supply issues. And so my publisher, like I get the book done and he's like, hey, we can get these things printed and out maybe September, October, November. And I'm like, dude, we got to get them done now. Like, how do we get them done now? Because we've gone from this great resignation to what's, likely a recession. If you look through the history of the world, we as a sales profession step on the same rake over and over again, and we're hitting it right now. Like there is layoffs happening, there is tightening. And as things tighten, the need for optimal sales leadership goes way up. And so I wanted to get this thing out right now too. So that the timing is one piece of it, but I think there's a huge opportunity for us to just up level the whole profession and make selling fun again and make it great, but actually optimize performance and cultures and all of those elements too. So it's that structure optimized by science on a bed of transparency. And
Mhm.
I think it's more important now than ever.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I just think the fact that you used this in your corporate career and you wanted to get in front of those holes or gaps before they actually appeared. How many sales leaders actually think like that and even consider a process versus just kind of, unfortunately relying on what they know best and, bringing it across the line for their teams.
Well, exactly. That was it. It was, I never having been a sales leader before, it was like whatever fire was going to guide my day was what I dealt with. Like I'd wake up and like,
Mhm.
hey, Todd, I need help with this deal. All right, car just turned that way. I'm going to go run that way. Oh, Todd, we got people you've got to interview and we've got recruiting to do. All right, cool. Board meeting coming up. Forecast, CEO one on one, like every day. And like it was driving me nuts. And so the structure was really this element of going, all right, what are my responsibilities as leader and what do I need to optimize? And I found really quickly that they fall into one of five buckets. And then being the dumbass that I am, I needed to make it alliterative and make them all start with like, I needed to make it memorable. And
Mhm.
I ended up using it for all my planning and strategizing, all my communicating. So one on ones, up, down, side to side, my managers. I used it as the agenda for board meetings, for interviews, for due diligence when we were considering acquiring new companies. And there's a story in the book that we can talk about if you want to, but where I I got pummeled by a what's called a forensic sales expert because we had missed a number, and I used it as the structure, and I came out of that looking fantastic, and I could use all the help I could get.
I believe the word was world class.
Yes, yeah, and I clearly wasn't like I'd been doing the role for like 15 months or something, but I guess like, I'll tell the story for everybody really quickly since I already teased it. For any of you that are in revenue leadership, just one big piece of advice. If you take a round of funding, make sure you at least hit that first quarter because when you don't, it really sucks. And that's what happened to me. We took a round of funding based on some forecasts that I had very little input into because I was fairly new to leadership. And we ended up doing like 94% of the target. So it wasn't terrible, but we missed. It was the end of June. I go home, hanging out with the family, all that. I get the call from my CEO saying, "Hey, Todd, pack a bag and get out to California. We're going to go meet with the chairman on Sand Hill Road in the Valley, and he's bringing a forensic sales expert to beat you up for 3.5 hours, basically. Like, there's going to be a whole morning. Get ready." Like, fantastic. That sounds like a blast, right? And so I get there, shaking the whole way. I meet with my CEO. We kind of do some prep. We get into the room, and sure enough, chairman, who was a badass, like the guy was just like, he's just almost like a mean dude. But the forensic sales expert, who was fantastic, like he was great. And then me and the CEO, this expert starts in on me, and I said, "Well, hey, can I share with you on the whiteboard like how I think about revenue leadership and sales leadership and like what my responsibility is, because we can use that to guide the discussion, basically use it as the agenda." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And so I walk through the 5 Fs. And for everybody, I'll give you the kind of the Cliff Notes version on that too. All of your responsibilities as a revenue leader fall into one of 5 categories, right? The first one is focus. You need to make sure that you are honing your team's most valuable asset at all times, which is their time, on the right opportunities, the right companies, the right individuals, the right prerequisites. So focus their time. The second responsibility is to build a field organization to attune to that focus. So it's the right people in the right places with the right tools and the right resources. The third F is fundamentals. So you got that field organization. You got to make sure they're doing the fundamentals right consistently, the messaging, positioning, prospecting, discovery, qualification, negotiation, all that stuff. Your fourth responsibility is to the forecast. You have to be able to predict the future and know the metrics and the KPIs so you can be proactive. And then the fifth F is fun. And fun, arguably the cheesiest, really talks to the culture that you build where your team wants to show up, stay, do their best, and advocate for you and your organization. So I write those 5 Fs on the board. We go through each one of those. I control the whole discussion. But at the end, like you said, he looked at the chairman. So this forensic guy, Mike, looks at Bob, the chairman, and says, "This guy's world class." And I was like I think I almost burst into tears. But the bad news was that the chairman then stared through the soul of my CEO while asking me to get up, leave the room, and meet us in the lobby. And I knew what was coming next, which was a CEO beatdown. They were looking at him as being the fault here and not me. Good for me, but I love my CEO too. And that was just one of those instances where when the crap starts flying, you always have a structure to fall back on, and it'll make you sound really smart.
Yeah, what a great story. And I'm a firm believer in structure and just that art and science. And I think for me, a lot of the benefit behind a process or a framework is that predictability and just it removes emotion and that knee jerk response. And I think in times like that, like when you think of the word forensic sales expert, it's kind of like you imagine FBI and rubber glove and you're like, what's going on
Exactly.
here? So that's a weird title, but like they're picking you apart. So I think, having that framework, I would imagine gave you some comfort and some methodology, even in your thoughts, keeping them compartmentalized so that you're following the framework. But even what you said, just taking control and going up on the whiteboard. And I don't know how many people would do that just to show your why, your thought process. And I would imagine that that disarmed your forensic person and just said, okay, I'm getting some context. I'm getting to see a little bit about this person. And it showed, combined when you marry the framework and your approach, that you were in control and that was a world class approach.
Yeah, and it was not a gimmick for the meeting. It was the way that I literally thought about the role every single day. And
Yeah.
once you take those 5 Fs and you internalize them, you could literally, after listening to this podcast, you could you could have a 30, 60, 90-day plan done in 20 minutes, right? Like go to a whiteboard yourself, write the 5 Fs out, go, how are we doing now? Where are the holes? What's our plan like, and never have to ask somebody again, like, hey, do you have a good template for a 30, 60, 90? Like we've heard that a million times. And so the fact that I had that just gave me comfort that there's really nothing he could ask me that I wasn't prepared for, because
Hmm.
that's the way that I thought about my business constantly and thought about my team and the way that we were trying to maximize the revenue capacity of the organization. So no surprises. I controlled it, and I sound like I keep joking that it made me sound real smart, but for all of you, you internalize those things, you're 98% ahead of everybody else. Like just
Mhm.
by having the 5 Fs. I used it for an interview that I went on an interview. I was up against, I was the 13th CRO candidate. I was the only one that walked in with having an answer that was structured based on the way that I would run the revenue organization. And I got the job like that afternoon. Doesn't mean I was
Mhm.
better than all 13. It just having a structure makes you sound smarter than everybody else too. So there's value there.
Well, I think it's so versatile, like you said, where you can use it, one-on-ones, interviewing, interviewee, and that it's pretty all inclusive, and I think the whole thing is the concern is that I forget something, and I think this is encapsulates everything, and again, the art and science, that's the science. But the art is allowing you to allow your experiences, share your unique approach to it that people also connect because you're a human. And I would imagine that was also a differentiator for you in getting that, CRO role.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when you try to layer in the whole transparency of it, um, that 5 Fs, like everybody in my organization knew what the 5 Fs were. Like, everybody working for me, everybody above me, all my senior leaders, like peers, running product, running marketing, they all knew it. And I think that's one of the other things that we miss as leaders is sharing the way that we think about our role and our responsibility. The one thing so when I first got my first, executive leadership role, I remember my CEO was kind of like, Todd, you're no longer a peer to these people. Like you're their boss. You got to show it, right? You've got to be a little bit more assertive and aggressive. And yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. But I think much to his chagrin, when I went and told the team, listen, I'm no better than any of you. I'm no more important than any of you. We are all equals and we will continue to be equals. We just have different job responsibilities, right? Your responsibility is, revenue generating, closing deals, prospect, like that kind of stuff. My responsibility is clearing the field for you and being a coach and help optimize and like help like make you have to go to the store and buy a bigger wallet, right? Like that's my role. And if we look at it that way and help each other, we're all going to win. And here's the way that I think about it. Here's the way that I plan. Here's the structure. Here's what
Mhm.
I'm good at. Here's where I could use your help in coaching, right? Nobody wants to run behind somebody who sucks, but nobody wants to run behind somebody who thinks they're perfect either, right?
Mhm.
Embrace that, but share your structure, share your process, and people will run behind you and support you. And I think you'd be surprised how often they're actually keeping their CRM updated and the opportunities and all of that stuff when they recognize you're not big brother, you're there to help them and to support them. You're all peers just with different responsibilities.
Yeah, and you know what, Todd? That's so good that you took that approach because a lot of people I coach, that's the issue. On Friday, they're a rep or an AM, and then on Monday, and so really the only thing that's changed is their title. But then it's like, how do you overnight they become this dictator, and it's like, we both closed a deal together,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
not even 48 hours ago, and all of a sudden now your boots are huge, and so I think I always go back to the model, the behavior, and so if you're looking for your team to be transparent to be honest and lead with integrity, like it starts with you. And even in that very first that first day of the job, going like, I don't have all the answers, and I'm relying on you to help me work together.
Yeah. And I was younger than everybody on the team too. Right, like this was an old school organization, and like they were selling to engineers in massive manufacturers, and so I was literally the youngest person in the whole sales organization. I wasn't going to go in
And
there and pretend I knew everything, and the person I was replacing was a guy that had been doing it for 30 years too, right? So complete flip.
yeah,
And so I needed to take that approach, and I learned that wow, we built a culture where we went from barely making it to growing 400% year over year and eventually selling the company to SAP. But gosh, it worked. It was great. Like it's fantastic. I'm going to take this to my next company and my next one. And it just grew over the 14 years before the book came out too. So
yeah, and think about how many people now. I mean, that was a tough choice to make. Just first of all, I would say they were probably ready for a change after 30 years, so they embraced a completely different way of thinking. But most people would, in my estimation, go with the safer route and, and not lead with transparency, especially knowing you're the new kid on the block. Like, and kid, you're the youngest dude in the room. So what would you say to people now, young leaders who are going in and it's kind of that environment when they've been there forever, and just like what would be that first step, in the mindset or the approach to go like you need to just you tell me what should they be thinking or what approach would they take?
Yeah, and to be clear, the leader was a 30-year veteran of leadership, but he'd only been at the company for 2 years, and it
Okay.
was a startup. I think they thought that I was always a nerd, right, for sales methodology and process, and I think in hindsight, I was a lot less expensive, so that probably helped too. And I think they just had a feeling that this was going to work. So I think it started there. It's funny. There's so many things like that last question about you're younger, you're moving into this role for the first time. Um, gosh, there's so many dynamics going on right now too that make that even harder. This dynamic of none of these leaders today have been trained in sales leadership. None of them, like zero. And when I'm teaching revenue leadership workshops for companies, that's always the first question I ask. Is like, there was one where there was 75 leaders in the room and a $200 million software company, and I asked that question, like, hey, how many of you have gotten leadership training? And there's a few hands that go up that have learned like leadership stuff. They've read some books, and I was like, all right, now specifically to revenue and sales leadership, how many? Zero. Even the CRO is like, does that even exist? And so when you look today, we had this explosion in growth in all markets, right? The economy went through the roof in 2021. Companies hired and hired and hired. And what are you going to do? There aren't enough experienced leaders out there. So many are promoting from within. And so the number of first time leaders is at a massive all time high with no training, right? You add to it, there's so many dynamics right now around the economy is tightening. Most of those leaders, well, none of those leaders have ever led through a recession because they're new to it. A lot of them have never even worked through a recession before. So you got that. Number two, you got companies that are bringing employees back into the office. And there's like hybrid and there's all that kind of stuff. So many of these leaders have never managed a workforce that's actually in a room with them. Like, holy crap, what? How do I do that? Right? There's so many new dynamics going on, and I think it's just about embrace what you know, embrace what you're certain of, embrace what you're uncertain about, and like go learn, but don't pretend that you're perfect, all knowing, and that you are promoted because you're perfect. Right? Like, be that peer to them and be that support structure, and they'll run behind you if you do it the right way.
Hmm. I mean, everything's stacked against them. Even the tenure is what 18 to 24 months of a sales leader. So, it sounds like they're feeling the pressure and they have to hit the ground running. And there's one quote that I'm just going to quote in the book. You said individuals tend to be less productive when they have feelings of uncertainty, inconsistency, and instability. So imagine pairing that with what you just said about someone coming in. They're inconsistent, they're unstable. That's a direct correlation to the performance of their team, which they want to make that mark. They want to hit that mark quick to, obviously show the impact they're having. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, actually, I'm going to even make it more timely too. There's something that I was reading about. I think I mentioned it briefly in the book, but I've dug in deeper since. We're going to talk for a second. Everybody, buckle up about Japanese death row inmates. All right, like what? Japanese death row? What are you talking about? Well, if you get sentenced to death in Japan, it sucks. I mean, like obviously you're in a like cells with everybody else, but they don't tell those inmates when it's coming, right? So when they go to bed at night, they have no idea whether is tomorrow going to be the day. As a result, those death row inmates got together with their lawyers, filed a class action lawsuit last year, 2021, against the Japanese government, calling that practice inhumane. So, of all the stuff about death row, the practice of them not saying anything was the most inhumane part. Now, let's take that to the sales world. We've got a situation now where, like PwC just last week is laying out some new data saying that almost half of companies have paused hiring, and there's almost that percentage that are looking to downsize. So we see layoffs, we see those structural issues going on. We see 4 in 10 of those 700 people that were interviewed saying that they're actually rescinding some job offers, right? Like it's getting a little uncertain. It's getting crazy. My advice for everybody and everybody listening to this, if you're especially in leadership, is have you shared where you and your organization are right now? Embrace the certainty. Like, what do you know? And share that with the organization, right? Like, here's where we are. Here's what we know. Here's our cash runway. Here's the plans. That's number one. For the stuff you're uncertain about, meaning you can't predict how deep it's going to go, how hard it's going to go, how it's truly going to impact you and your company over the long term, embrace those things. Share, like, here's what we don't know. And for those things, create a regular cadence around when you're going to update everybody. You could say, hey, like every 3 weeks, we're going to get on a call Thursday at 10 in the morning, and we're going to give you an update on those uncertain items and share where we are. Because otherwise, if your team hasn't heard anything, they are going to bed right now after having read on Twitter and all that about layoffs, about talking to their friends who are also like they're getting laid off. They go to bed at night like Japanese death row inmates going, are they going to say something? And like, is tomorrow going to be the day I'm going to lose my job? And as a result, they don't sleep as well. When you don't sleep as well, you don't perform as well. When you don't perform as well, you're not as creative. And literally, when there's uncertainty abound, your IQ goes down. You go into almost like a survival mode. And so that's kind of like my timely advice for all of you is like, embrace the certainty, embrace the uncertainty, and create regular cadences around when you will address the uncertainty. And I'm telling you, your team will sleep better and they'll be more engaged.
Wow. And think about, if you do that as a leader, you're inviting your sales reps to do that with their customers or their prospects and say, like, this is what we have. This is what we don't know. I can't tell you at this time when we're going to launch version 5 because it's software. But what I can do is I can commit to giving you biweekly or weekly, like think about that. And their competitors are like, we can do everything, or, just a game of overcommitting. And so let me just ask you this, is the Japanese example, is that also to do with the brains, or in that instance, the inability to predict?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, it's exactly that. We as human beings are prediction machines, right? Like I almost feel that the primary role of leadership is to help teams predict and help teams embrace uncertainty and help teams know that if they go try something, they're not going to get killed for it, right? Like sales is fraught with things that create anxiety, right? Like making a cold call. All of us, like there's the few that like don't get any anxiety when you make it, but that's an anxiety ridden thing, right? You're going to make a presentation to a team, there's anxiety. I'm going into a negotiation, there's anxiety. I'm closing, there's anxiety. Part of our role as sales professional or sales leaders is to help those individuals know that there's risk and reward and that it's going to be okay, right? Like you've got to create that certainty on the back end. But it's also like in these environments, you got to know that there isn't a hatchet swinging behind your head, right? That like you're suddenly going to be surprisingly like laid off, or something, you're going to get fired, or hey, somewhere you sucked for poor performance, but nobody ever told you you had poor performance, right? Like that, a big part of revenue leadership's role is to create predictability, because we as human beings do our best work when we go to bed at night and we know what we're getting into the next morning.
Mm-hmm. That sounds to me like, in coaching, we say we just hold space or create a safe space for people. And I just think, think about 2020 when everything hit the wall and there was so much uncertainty, and people that may have been onboarded remotely or haven't really had that connection with their team. And then the boss, who maybe responds normally every 2 hours, doesn't respond for a day. Imagine what's going on in their head. I'm being fired. I didn't close that deal. They're evaluating me. I'm going to go on. Like, it exasperates things. So I just think if you can lay it out, you're being transparent, but you're putting your team at ease. And like, again, all the benefits associated, they're going to improve performance. They're going to feel safe.
Yes. Yeah. And you've got to be consistent as a leader too. That's so funny you say that, because it's, even picture the last time that all of a sudden your manager put a meeting notice on your calendar, right? Like, hey, I need 15 minutes with you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Our brain automatically goes to worst case scenario. Like you're in a field and there's a bunch of reeds, and all of a sudden there's this brown thing moving, right? Like your brain immediately thinks that's a snake. It could just be a stick in the wind, right? You're in the woods and you hear something rustling. You think it's a bear. It might just be a branch that fell off a tree or a rabbit, right? Our brains go to dark places when there's uncertainty abound. So we as leaders need to recognize that. And part of what you said though is consistency. That it's almost better to be consistently a jerk as a leader than it is to be inconsistent, because that inconsistent is the thing that when you don't know what you're getting yourself into, that's when your IQ goes down.
Mm-hmm. And nobody likes that, because I know in corporate I've had those emails and you're just like, oh man,
Yeah, like
did I?
what's this?
And you go through your sent and you're like, did I copy the wrong person? Did I? And so immediately the brain, and I think the natural default is the negative.
Yes, exactly.
But it just takes a little context to work around that, which is surprising why some people just don't make it a little easier for their team, especially some people who are new and really haven't. I just think back to my 25-year-old self and I'm like, I didn't sleep last night. And then it was like, oh, the field 14 in Salesforce wasn't filled out. And you're like, great, I just developed an eating disorder for nothing.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right.
What's funny? There's a similar example as Navy SEALs when they're training. I remember reading this book, and every morning they go for a run and they never know the distance. So it could be 16 miles, it could be 2 miles.
Wow. Oh, that's
And it's just
interesting.
because in that environment, they have to be prepared. They can't predict. It's the unpredictable that they're dealing with, and they have to be able to fire on all cylinders, knowing that I'm going to come up strong regardless of what's coming my way.
Wow, I
I know.
love that. That's awesome. I'll footnote you when I use that example. That's fantastic.
And what's funny about first of all, I read the book. I've read both of them. I love them. And a lot of times when people say, "What's a great book?" and for me, anyone starting in sales at any point in their sales career, I definitely would recommend the Transparency Sale, because it really is just a different way of doing things. But also it's invited me to look at, how my customer, what experience am I creating that's making it easy for them to predict? Because they're going to look at, okay, this is what she's like now. Is she putting her best foot forward to get this deal? Or what can she, once it's signed, are we going to see a lazy, like overcommit and underdeliver? So it really invites me to go, I see, compressed sales cycle, because I'm like, they know they're going to get exactly what I've delivered up until now, and even talk to any of my customers. So I think there's a level of intentionality of just going, put yourself in your customer's shoes, and think about any experience you've had when you're dealing with someone who's totally pitching and they're this, and then at the end of it, well, I'd really like to partner with you, and you're like, you've shown me that you're nothing, there's nothing good about this from the get-go, so there's zero chance of us partnering.
Well, that's the funny thing, and if you'll allow me to go on a little rant for a moment, one of the things we haven't talked about is my nerdery for sales history. I like when cool people are doing cool things on the weekends. I'm reading old 1900, early 1900 sales and sales leadership books, but there's a reason I just laid that foundation. I'm going to give you a quote. Um, Buyers know more nowadays, right? You hear that all the time. Buyers know more nowadays. Would it surprise you that that quote is from Thomas Herbert Russell's 1912 book, Salesmanship? So that quote is 110 years old. And at the time, they were worried about the pervasiveness of information via marketing and advertising's growth that would put the sales profession, basically make it obsolete. Well, it didn't. Sales flourished. You fast forward to 2015, so just 7 years ago, Forrester put out their annual State of Sales report. And in it, they predicted that 1 million B2B sales jobs would go away by the year 2020. So 5 year period, 2015 to 2020, 1 million B2B sales jobs would go away, and that hundreds of thousands of college graduates would not enter the sales profession because buyers know more nowadays, right? And because of e-commerce and all that, what happened? The profession flourished. I think I know why. It's because more information has not made it easier for buyers, it's made it
Mm-hmm.
harder. And that when we come at it from the right perspective that our responsibility and role as a sales professional is to do exactly what you just said, Karen, which is to help the buyer predict, right? To do the homework for them, right? There's so much homework, it becomes overwhelming, and we wonder why we lose more to the status quo than any other competitor. It's because they're overwhelmed with perfect speak. If you can do the homework for them and partner with them, you use that word partner, right? To like, hey, listen, if I'm in your shoes, here's what you're going to love, here's what you might not, right? And if that might not is going to be a big deal, let's address that now. And if it is going to be a big deal, let's part as friends and like let's move on with our lives, right? As quickly as possible so we both don't waste our time. You do that homework for the buyer, you differentiate in the way that you sell, you end up with customers that buy more often, that stay, that buy more, and then become references for you. That's about our role as salespeople is not to convince. It's to help the buyer predict. And that I believe that wholeheartedly. And I believe that's why the profession continues to flourish. It's those individuals that recognize that and recognize their role as a Sherpa and not some necessary evil.
Yeah, I love that. And it really is our role to make a decision because the more information it's like going to I bring my kids to the store and if there was three choices, we'd be out of there pretty quick. But they're going in aisle by aisle and I'm like, just pick one thing. So it actually makes it even harder. So I just think, and back to your original, I think it's 4.2 to 4.5 is where people buy on the review scale. But just taking that approach immediately disarms them because they're like, oh, this girl's not blowing smoke because she's not saying she's perfect. And I would say that's a complete differentiator because I remember in some meetings in corporate they'd be saying, well, we can do this, and they're like, can you do this? And like, yep. Yep. Yeah. And I'm like looking at them. I'm like, what do you do? We can't. Like, why are you saying that? But I just think in the customer, when I ask those questions as a consumer now, I can call BS. I'm like, you do not have that. I know you don't. And I'm just like, you're eroding trust. Like, why are you lying when I know nobody can do it?
Well, exactly. If you're presenting your solutions as perfect, either A, they could have sent a brochure, or B, you're not actually making it easier for the buyer. Ironically, you're making it harder for them to make a decision because our brains were wired to know subconsciously that perfection does not exist. And until we can get at the negatives, you mentioned the 4.2 to 4.5. That's a product, and that's across all product categories, optimal for purchase conversion when a website's acting as a salesperson is when the review score is between a 4.2 and a 4.5, meaning that when there's negative reviews, the product will sell at a higher conversion rate than when there's nothing but perfect 5-star reviews. But even the more interesting piece of that is that all of you listening go to the negative reviews first, right? When you're going to buy something you haven't bought before. You skip the 5s, you go right to the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. We're all wired to do that. And it's because we need to understand whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze. We're trying to make a prediction. And if we can't get at any information or data about what the squeeze is going to be, we can't even process all the good nutritious flavor, all that of the juice. Like we need that first. And that's why I'm just that's when a website's acting as a salesperson, but it's the way we're all wired. It's when a human is acting as a salesperson too. When you lead with this is what you're giving up to be great at your core. And if what we're giving up is important, let's talk about that now. And that could be something a competitor does better, a feature that's missing. Maybe you're
Hmm.
priced high. If you're talking about a 6-figure solution to a 4-figure buyer, one of you's in the wrong discussion. You might want to figure that out right now, right? Like that. Those are the types of things that not only from a, using behavioral science for good, not evil perspective, helps buyers reach decisions faster, but it helps you use your time better too.
Yeah, I love that because I think when we're trying to be everything to everybody, it's just it's a lie and it makes it very easy for them to go to a more realistic option. But even when you say when that's acting as a website, but when you're actually in person, you get context and you understand, why is this important? Like, why do you need that? And even there's an opportunity to educate. Well, just, and educate with transparency. So what I've heard is it's like people that want to run a marathon, but they've never run a 5K. And so understanding why is a marathon important to you? Because we don't sell marathon training, but we do have a 5K, which, and just there's that opportunity, having that in-person connection that allows you to even understand where's this, people are like, I can't answer this question. My thing is, well, why are they asking that question? Like, where is that coming from?
And that's leadership too, right? If you're presenting yourself as the all knowing, perfect leader, people don't trust you and they don't want to run behind you. If you're presenting your solutions as being perfect to your potential buyers, they don't trust you and they probably don't want to run behind you, right?
Hmm.
Those elements are just, and you've all experienced it. Everybody listening to this has experienced those know-it-all perfect people that you're just like, after you talk to them, you want to go take a shower, and deal with those salespeople that like are just trying to convince you to buy and they're hammering you and every other solution sucks except yours, right? You that makes it harder for you to buy. Your brain does not want to trigger a decision, and you need to take a step back and go do your own homework, right? Well, do the homework for the buyer. Like that's your opportunity. And as a sales leader, expose how you think about things and play your cards face up for all of your team members, and they'll want to see you be as successful as you want to see them be.
Yeah. And I would say anyone listening has been on the receiving end of a know-it-all. I know I've been on both sides. But think about, the importance of a leader and their impact or their ability to create culture. And if you're taking this know-it-all approach, you're inviting your team to take that approach. When you're doing hiring and retention, you're looking for similar people that you're basically you're creating a toxic culture based on your thought process.
Oh, absolutely. Exactly. That's it. And like that behavioral science stuff, when I talked about that fifth F, which is fun, just it really kind of lives on this basis of the old school line that you've probably heard a million times, which is salespeople are coin operated, right? Like you hear that phrase, and you're right. Salespeople are coin operated if you're doing it wrong. Our job as leaders is to create cultures where your team wants to show up every day, stay, do their best, and become advocates for you and your organization. And that variable compensation and the money becomes the reward for doing work they love to do instead of the reason they do it. And notice like one of the things that drives us, and that's the science of intrinsic inspiration, meaning extrinsic is the money, the rewards. Intrinsic is I wake up in the morning and I want to get to it, right? Like we all do charity work. We don't do charity work for the money, of course. We don't do it for the rewards. There's some people that want to, post on Instagram, look at me, I'm doing charity work. But for the most part, we do it because we're making an impact and there's a purpose to it, and that we're surrounded by people that are like-minded and that we're on a mission together, and that it's like those are the reasons why we do what we do, and money becomes the reward. If you create environments like that, you'll win.
I love that. And when I read the intrinsic versus extrinsic, I would say even a demographic, I feel in my training that a lot of the younger generations now want to be part of something more than just a paycheck, a sense of community, a sense that, and even knowing, and I know you talked about this a lot in the book, of knowing that your product matters, knowing that you are making a difference versus just, I can sell tobacco. It's like when I sell something, and that's where that emotion, empathy, and you're not selling, you truly are helping because
Yes,
you believe in it.
you care about the customer outcomes. That was I have a rant in there. So shameless self backpatting. I predicted the Great Resignation before it happened, and it was because of that. It was because far too many organizations were not aligning what their reps did to anything that mattered, and that the purpose of them doing their work was to hit their number. And what I mean is, you're going to have a Great Resignation when the physical cost to change jobs goes away, which it did during the pandemic, right? Like commutes don't change. You get a new laptop and maybe I send you a new pair of logoed socks and that's it. Your emotional cost to change goes away too because you've never actually met these people.
Mhm.
We can't pretend to say that relationships are built as strongly when all we've done is looked at people through the little green light on our laptops. That being in the trenches and being with people is how you build those relationships. So low physical cost to change jobs, no commute change. Low emotional cost. I haven't met you. It's easier for me to leave you if I've never actually hung out with you and had a real happy hour instead of a cheesy virtual one. The smallest triggers are causing people to leave, right? Higher quota. All right, see ya. Smaller territory. Uh, you know, toodaloo. I just lost a deal and my pipeline doesn't look good. I'm going to get out of here before that comes to bite me. A buddy of mine is making a ton of money and loving where they're working and they're hiring. See ya. that was the organizations that didn't have an emotional tie to what they did. And I think the unique thing that all companies have, your company, like everybody listening, your company, if you don't know what your work means to your customers, and if you don't know what your work means to your customer's customer, and you think that your job is just to bring in money and revenue, your triggers for leaving are probably not there. And the one example I always give is, like, even in my last role, I was chief revenue officer of a company called Power Reviews, right? That's why I know this review nerdy stuff. But we helped retailers and brands collect and display ratings and reviews on their website. Who cares? You know who cares? That end customer that's spending their hard-earned money that they don't have a whole lot of. And our reviews on these retailer and brand websites, we're helping those people to make really smart decisions with that money, right? Making the best decision for them and their families and living better lives as a result of it. Our team, when they felt that, the team members that really felt that became review nerds, like, to the highest order. Like, they couldn't wait to talk to somebody about, like, the consumer reviews and information like that, and how to leverage it and how to help your customers, make smarter decisions. And they're still in the review space, right? They might not be with Power Reviews anymore, but they developed a passion for it. And as a result, our turnover went to almost zero. Every
Hmm.
every organization's got an opportunity to create that differentiator for their team members, to know that their mission, impact, purpose of work is not just hitting their quota.
Yeah, and I think it's the angle. I mean, you took the approach of looking at it beyond just the physical review and a number, and just knowing that these people work hard for their money, and by you working there, you're helping them make better choices and allowing them to do other things with the savings. And I'm just looking here, quoting page 128, you have here: "Do the individuals on my sales team know what their work truly means to me, both professionally and personally?" And then you go on to the organization and the customers, and what it means to the customers' customers. And I would argue that many people don't. And I would also argue that this is the job or the role of the leader to really highlight that. And the example you always went back to was the medical device company. And ironically, I sold medical devices for 20 years and software. And I remember I worked in the hospitals all the time. And I remember seeing these children hooked up on equipment going through chemotherapy. And I was like, yes, of course, I was, motivated by money to an extent. But when I saw the impact it had, there was no selling. It was like I saw it from the angle of, I saw the nursing staff, the physicians. My mother was a nurse, so there was empathy, there was relatability. And then I saw how it could help them. So complete transparency, but I was coming at it. There wasn't selling. It was just like, I truly want to help you and
Exactly.
help
Yeah.
these
Right.
kids.
Money is the reward, not the reason you do it.
No. And one last thing about that is transparency. We sold a bunch of different pumps, and one of them was an epidural pump, and I was pregnant at the time. And I said, I am so transparent here that I will be using this pump should you buy it, because I will be in this hospital.
Wow, that's amazing. That's hilarious.
A lot of people put their name. They won't put their names on things. They're not going to advocate, and that's the difference between being a salesperson and in advocating for it, putting your name on and saying, use this on me. That's how much I believe that it will help you. I'm willing to try it myself.
Wow. Yeah, you should write about that. That's a great story. I love that.
But the irony is I didn't get an epidural.
Oh, really?
One thing I just want to comment, you've mentioned nerdery many, many times. So where did the nerdery come from? Were you always curious? Were you a science geek growing up, or where did this come from, Todd?
I wish I knew. There was there were a couple of books that I read early on that I was like, oh, that's interesting, just around, behavioral science and that. And then I started to think about it from a sales perspective and go, wait, you know what? We, for the most part, know how decisions formulate and get triggered in the human brain. Why haven't we taken that to the sales world? And could that give me an advantage as a salesperson, right? And I don't know early in my career whether I cared whether it was used for good or evil, but we'll keep that off to the side. But but it was like, hey, there's so much here, and so much in the way that we think about our profession that conflicts with that. That if we just make some tweaks here and there in the way that we position, the way that we prospect, the way that we present, the way we even negotiate, there could be some magic there. And that's where it all started. And then now I've taken that to the leadership realm where it's like, if you really understand how human beings wake up in the morning and do what they do, whether it's decision making or just where they find the inspiration to do their best work, if you just understand that at a basic level, and like in the book, I tried to write it in a way that I would want to read it. Like I tried to write it in a way that's not super nerdy and technical, like the cerebellum. And like I don't talk about any of that crap. It's just like, hey, at a high level, think about how you make decisions. Think about what drives you. Here's the model for it. Go use it. That's the whole point, right? Just make it easy and accessible. And that's what I tried to do in my career and figured I want to make this career better. Here goes, and just
Mhm.
kind of throw it out there for the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, you did a great job of that in the book for sure. I do have a Bachelor of Science, but I was able to understand it. So. um, and so I can just recall back to when I started in sales 20 years ago, and we did product training, and we really didn't do sales training. There was no positioning. It was feature benefits. So a lot of times I question, is sales a profession? How do we keep the integrity of it up? But if you're just teaching your team features and benefits, it's continuing to erode sales as a profession. And what I love about it is also, like you said, the neuroscience behind it. And you can even remove sales. It's just connecting, it's understanding how people think, how people make a decision, even, especially in the virtual world, like what is the unspoken, what is the spoken? Like when I do this, what do they do? And it just seems it's iterations, but it's just honestly dealing with humans. And I just think that even knowing now that we love to predict, the brain wants to keep us safe and conserve energy, knowing all that, God, we if we don't know what to do and we're not adjusting, then it's kind of shame on us.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the whole idea of like feature benefit selling is one of the reasons why, some old school salespeople are no longer selling. And the ones that understood that piece are the ones that evolved to it and realized that buyers don't need features and benefits. They need that help with culling through all the information. They need that help with making the best decision for them. And they need an advocate that's going to really care about them achieving their outcomes, whether it's with you or with a competitor or by telling them not to do anything.
Hmm.
Right. And that's where it begins. Those are the people that you're attracted to as human to human, relationship to relationship, and just start selling that way. Right.
Hmm.
And like this happens to me in my own business. I teach for like, individual contributors, the behavioral science and then applied to messaging and positioning, formal presenting, negotiating. And then I teach leadership programs and workshops, the structure and all of that. I had a company call me. It was a big company. And they're like, Todd, we've heard great things about you. We need your top of funnel prospecting program, right? Like, you help us with the prospecting structures and all that. And I was like, all right. Like, and I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to get to. And I was like, all right, cool. There's probably 50 people that do that. If you made a list of the 50, I would come in at about number 47. Um, like I could do it, but there's people that are so much better at that than me. Can I give you a couple of names? And
Hmm.
so like the two best that I know, I'll make the intros to you and like go have the conversation with them. And they're awesome. And these people, while they're sitting there, they're just like, wait, what? They seem confused that I didn't do that and that I just tried to basically get rid of them, but it wasn't getting rid of them. I just know that I suck at that. And what ended up happening is we made the connection. They were bringing in the woman that I referred to for the top of funnel stuff. And I ended up doing all the leadership programs for the whole organization.
Hmm.
So it ends up coming back around to you
Yes.
anyway. But stop trying to be all things to all people. Your role is to help them achieve outcomes, to listen, and to truly be an advocate for them and their success.
Hmm. That's a great story. I've heard it many times, and I do it myself. But I think people still struggle with detaching from that outcome and just really hanging on to, well, I'll do it. And it's like, well, why would you do you want to half-ass it and degrade your reputation and not give them the results they're looking for? So talk to us, Todd, about what people can do, even at the rep level, just going like, how can I detach and take my commission lens off and go either, yeah, I can help you predict it's us. It might be our competitors, or you might be decide now is not the right time to change. Like, how can you teach somebody to to be okay with that approach?
Well, especially right now when we're heading into a period of uncertainty. A lot of companies, their knee jerk response is let's cast a wider net.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in casting a super tight net. I call it extreme firmographic focus, but it's know where you provide the most value at the highest dollar amounts with the highest win rates in the slowest, like the smallest cycle lengths, right? And work with your organization to figure that out. Look at your case studies, go talk to your customers. When you start there and you go, listen, there's ideal customer profile, great. When I'm thirsty, ideally grabbing a glass of water would do it, but there's still 100 ways I could quench my thirst. The same thing happens with your focus as sales leaders, as sales organizations, is there's an ideal customer profile, but I believe you could go tighter. Know what you're great at. Know that the only thing that you have in your inventory to convert to revenue is your time.
Mm-hmm.
And every minute that you're spending in an opportunity that's not optimal is a minute that you could have been spending either working at an opportunity that is optimal or looking for another one that is. You've got to embrace that. And if you're a revenue leader, you got to make sure that your team is empowered to say no quickly. They want to make money. They want to hit their quota. They're not going to say no to everybody just because you gave them the rope to do it. Focus, focus, focus. And that's what I do, right? It's not only from that perspective of they wanted top of funnel prospecting. That's not my expertise, but I even do that down to the demographic level. I know that when I get an inbound from a revenue leader, a enablement leader, or somebody that's like regional leadership at a really big company, those are great. When I get one from HR, it's just hard for me, right? Because they're like focused on training overall. They don't really get what I do because what I talk about is a little different. My structures are different, my process, like, and so it takes longer. They need more references. They have a harder time getting at dollars. So I qualify out of those
Mm-hmm.
instantly. And a lot of times when I do, they're like, wait, why? What's wrong? Let me get my sales leader involved in this. And all of a sudden it accelerates. So
Yeah.
that trust building, if they really want to work with you, they're going to work with you anyway. But just know where you're good,
But that
optimize your time.
And that's just what you said. They're going to work with you anyway. But I think we don't trust the system and we don't, or the process, or ourselves. And I loved reading that part because I know the same. I know the roles that reach out to me, the ones that are going to be tire kickers that have no idea and they're just trying to get their three quotes or whatever. And I'm just like, I think also you have to be burned and you go, I invested, 3 months into this. This title has no clue what they're doing. And so next time it comes in, and that's the thing, when you say no, they're like, what? And so you indirectly get to where you need to be, but you had to go through kind of, a filter
You build
first.
trust. Like confidence is contagious,
Yeah.
everybody. Like it's when you're confident in yourself and your offerings, the people that you talk to become more confident as a result in you and your offering. They're more willing to listen. They're going to pay it like, and that's what I've got. I'm at my business is pretty much at capacity. Like I just hired somebody, so I'm hoping to like break through and get some time. But I have to be optimal in the way that I invest my time. I have to,
Mhm.
otherwise I can't scale. And I think with all of your organizations, I mean, the reason that we don't do it so often is because we've got an empty pipeline,
Mhm.
right? But you got to get past that. Like you got to think differently about it's better to have an empty pipeline than a pipeline that's completely filled with crap.
Yeah. And even when just to add on that with the time, it's the fleeting resource, but think about sales leaders. And if they optimize their time, they can do that by empowering their team to do it themselves. And that allows them to like let go of those tight reins and give them the freedom, the critical thinking, the confidence to go, yeah, I can do this on my own. I don't need Todd holding my hand in every meeting.
Exactly, and that goes to I think you probably read in the book one of my big rants, something I did wrong. Which used to be this idea of managing my team to
Oh.
certain metrics. One of those metrics was, hey, at all times you got to have 4x your quota in pipeline, right? Because we know we're going to close 25%. So you got to have enough pipeline to make sure that when 75% of that drops out, you got enough to hit your target. In hindsight, that was dumb. And here's why. If I'm managing to 4x pipeline, then what do my reps do? They fill their pipeline with 4x of their quota of crap,
Mhm.
right? And they're afraid to qualify out and they're chasing deals that we really should have no business winning. We need to look at all right, why is it 4x? And could it be 2x? Could we get better at qualifying in faster, but also qualifying out the deals we're going to lose anyway faster and not be afraid to do it and get so efficient at our win rates that we only need 2x? And if we've got 4x, it means we're probably going to do 200% of our number, right? Like that would be fantastic. And that's the way to think about it. So just be wary of what you're measuring to. And if you're measuring something to an average, you're on a route to be average.
Hmm.
Think through like how do you optimize those things, and that was a big lesson for me in qualifying in and out, and the power of transparency to do that faster.
Yeah, I think you're just creating a culture there of almost lies and people telling you what they think you want to hear. And it's like, I'll put in whatever you want me to put in the field, knowing that none of this stuff's going to, like, I'll create an opportunity. And I just think then there's the reluctance and there is a lot of fear of I can't disqualify because now I'm at 199, 190, and it's constantly going down and you hit the panic button. So that comes back to the sales leader and just creating that transparency and going like, why even inviting them, like, why can't we look at quality and really look at, having less of them, but real qualified in that sweet spot of our ICP? And let's maybe go through and review again, focus of what that actually is, because it might have changed as a result of the pandemic.
Exactly, that's it.
One other thing you said that I loved, and I talk about this a lot, is aligning your energy to your productive times in the day. And so sometimes when sales leaders are having, they have a team of 6 and they know there's 2 morning people and, the rest are afternoon people, but having your one-on-ones or your meeting, you're denying them that creative time. And so again, it's knowing your team, it's really coaching to the individual, not the team, but how can you be aware of that to go, let's meet at noon. It's a low time for everybody. Let's have a working lunch. Let's do something, but really just being intentional. And that pays itself off because your team feels like, you know what, Todd's working around this because he knows, that this is my prime time and this is when I excel the most.
Exactly, I think we all know it, and I encourage you, if you don't, to like think about are you at your best, when you at your sharpest, when you get your best work done, and when don't you. Like for me, I'm a morning person. Like this morning I got on a roll. I put on something called the Deep Focus playlist on Spotify. I was writing, I got invoicing done, I got a ton of stuff done this morning, and I know by about 2 o'clock, if I don't have another cup of coffee, I'm going to be dragging. And when you think about that across your teams, so often, let's say you've got a whole team of morning people, but yet you do daily morning check-ins with the team, right? What are you doing? Well, the 15 minutes before it, they're not getting into anything, right? They're going to slow down and get ready for the meeting. Then they're in this meeting together, which, yeah, it's productive, but is it optimally productive? Could it have been done, like you said, over lunch or in the afternoon at 2 o'clock, when maybe they're on less of a role? Understanding that at the team level and when you schedule meetings, but also at the individual level. And just know, like, don't slack the people when they're in their zone, right? Just leave them
Mhm.
alone, because from 8 to 10 every morning, they're probably crushing it. And I'll hit
Yeah.
them at noon with this issue, right? It's one of those psychological things we don't think about, and we rob people of their most productive time every single day.
Yeah, it's almost selfish, from the leadership standpoint, and I think even just a step above that is, do you know these things about your team? Do you know when their energy levels are? And it's incumbent upon you as a leader to understand, even their personal goals, their spouses, their family, to create that connection to really, just the bond in the community that, as we talked about, create it's such a low barrier to change now that maybe if all things being equal, you know what, Todd actually, sent me and my husband or something, there's compassion there, there's caring. That's enough to make the difference. Well, listen, I mean, again, is there going to be a third? I mean, I'm kind of on the edge now. What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, I know I've got at least two more in me.
Okay.
But like, the most popular concept in the first book, which is up until now, the leadership stuff has been the most popular class that I teach, is called transparent negotiating.
Mhm.
And I write a chapter about it in book one, and everybody's like, "Oh, I love that chapter." And I teach it, and it's such I believe, a profound change in thinking in a world where everything is as a service, right? Software as a service, product as a service. Yet we still negotiate like it's 1985, and we're doing one deal plus a perpetual, like a maintenance license, and we're using what techniques been taught by former FBI hostage negotiators. Like, We don't have to do that. We don't have to erode trust at the goal line.
Mhm.
And playing your cards face up in a negotiation is so powerful and it's so darn easy.
Mhm.
And so I think there's an opportunity to really double down and help people negotiate like it's 2022 and not 1985. So I've thought about that one. I have a couple other ones. Like one's a little wacky, and I don't know if I want to go on this media tour, but when I just watch politics, I think it would be amazing to write a book called The Transparent Politician, and how refreshing that would be for somebody to embrace behavioral science and how people make decisions to actually bring people together instead of polarize the crap out of them. And it's not that hard. And I'm waiting for one politician to do it so that there's a case study and I could go write a book called The Transparent Politician.
That sounds like an oxymoron.
Exactly. It's impossible. Nobody does it. And I don't know why, but there's a reason why salespeople and politicians end up at the bottom of Gallup's annual trusted professions list every year, right? Like we talk and sell as though we're perfect fives, and that
Mhm.
we talk and sell like anybody who doesn't agree is an idiot. No wonder we polarize the crap out of people, and no wonder we continue to be at the bottom. I think there's a huge opportunity for sales to get our mojo back. But that's kind of the joke about the fourth book would be, is there an opportunity for politicians to actually bring people together too? I think from a behavioral science, absolutely. I don't know if anybody would buy it.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely, and it just kind of brings us full circle into that, how as you as a sales leader or sales rep can really operate from that 4.2 to 4.5, knowing that, claiming perfection in a 5 is just completely going to turn your audience or your team off.
Exactly. As Tyra Banks calls it, be flawsome, right? You are awesome, but you've got flaws. Embrace your flawsome.
And you know what? Because the flaws you point out might also be the flaws that your customer has. And all of a sudden there's relatability and there's alignment.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Well, I want to thank you for, again, I really enjoyed reading both of these books, and thank you for sharing with us all the stats and the neuroscience. I love that. I love nerding out on that as well. And so if people are intrigued, they want to learn more, they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that, Todd?
ToddCaponi.com has got all the links and all the sources and blog articles and videos and all kinds of stuff there if you're so inclined. But I do share a lot of my nonsense on LinkedIn if you want to follow along or connect. If you connect, I would love to hear where you heard me. But yeah, those are probably the two best places to start. And you can reach out to me through either one.
Perfect. I would say it's not nonsense, but
Yeah.
thank you so much again, Todd. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too, Karen. Thanks. And look forward to being the first person on 3 times.
All right.